which is still...
He said you've got to write it in the Qurayshi dialect, okay?
Yeah.
So there's only one way, according to us.
Yeah, so the seven modes of recitation is not that Qurayshi dialect thing. That's different, okay? That's why I'm saying you need to understand the nuances about researching about this topic. Without that, you won't be able to. And this is exactly the mistake that DCCI make. Because what they do is they listen to certain statements from other scholars, and they do not even realize what these scholars were talking about. So when you talk about the 7 modes of recitation, this is the different ways in which it can be recited. So it can be different words being substituted for other words. It can be, for example, a word which might be used in a different way. The same word might be used in a different way.
Now there are still 7 different ways of reciting the Quran?
Yes, still to this day.
Okay.
There you go. So all these hafs, warsh, Qalun, all these different ways of reciting, the modes of recitation, is still active to this day.
So you're saying those, they're called Qirat, okay? I'm right, saying they're called Qirat, okay? Are you saying that those Qirat are actually exactly the same as the Aruf, I think it's called, isn't it, right? Which is what the ways in which, you know, when Muhammad said you can recite the Quran in 7 different Aruf, is that the correct Arabic term, yeah?
Yes.
So you're saying that Qirat is the same as Aruf?
No, I'm not saying it's the same.
Okay.
I'm saying the Qira'at, then inside the Qira'at there is these different ahruf, which shows the reasoning for these differences within that. So they're 2 different things, not the same thing. But the important point is this: all these 7 Qira'at was already revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, in his time, it wasn't something that was invented later on. Like for example, if you look at the Catholic book and the Protestant book, you don't even agree about the number of books in there. Yes? So the Protestants say we have 66 only. The Catholics say no, we have 73 books.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We're recording this for you for a little bit later, but Brother Mansoor is in a conversation, so I just want to see if we can get this out. Sorry, brother. Record you, Brother Mansoor? Okay, fine. It doesn't want to be recorded, it's a private conversation, so we'll go back to Brother Hashim. Sometimes Dawah is given in private, so you know, sometimes it's best, especially with certain Muslims who come down to ask certain questions. Just bear with me a moment, I'll put this back on Hashim. Grab that for me, bro. Jazak Allah Khair.
Or even from the manuscript from the 1st century, there is no way for anyone to identify what Jesus said from what was found in the 4th century.
Well, this is the whole scholarly study of textual criticism.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Yes. By comparing the manuscripts and seeing there are some small variations.
No, not small. That's
there
what
are small variations between the manuscripts.
My friend.
But by comparing them all, we can deduce what is the original version. Okay.
This is the claim of the Christians, that there are only minor differences. Yeah. But if you look at the actual scholars like Bart Ehrman, what they say is that there are so many. Hear me out.
I think Bart Ehrman would agree that.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you exactly what Bart Ehrman said about the number of differences in the. Just put this away. Sorry. The variances that's found in the manuscripts. I'll tell you exactly what Bart Ehrman said. In fact, he says something like there are so many variances. There are as many variances as there are number of words in the New Testament.
Yeah, of course, there are thousands of variants between the thousands of manuscripts.
So they don't agree with each other. That's the point he was making.
You know, if you have, right? Okay, there are thousands of variants between the thousands of manuscripts. Okay. Okay. But I think you'll find that Bart Ehrman is pretty happy about the text of the New Testament.
What? I mean, the core of the belief is this changed.
Yeah. So I just want to not quote, misquote him.
I'm going to quote Bart Ehrman for you. Okay?
Yeah, go on.
I got right. This is what Bart Ehrman says in. I will just check what I'm going to quote from. So if you want to look it up, you can.
Yeah, give me the reference.
Yourself, okay.
I'll quote from Bart Ehrman in Misquoting Jesus.
Okay, I'm going to quote from Misquoting Jesus as well.
Okay, good. You quote first if you want, or I can go first.
Quite a long quote. I'm sorry about this, but he says he's talking about his co-author Bruce Metzger, who is also a scholar. Okay.
Bruce Metzger was a teacher of Bart Ehrman. Did you know that?
That's right. Yes.
He was actually a Christian.
He studied under under Bruce Metzger.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's
but
right.
Bart Ehrman left Christianity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Carry on.
He says Bruce Metzger is one of the great scholars of modern times. And I dedicated the book to him because he was both my inspiration for going into textual criticism and the person who trained me in this field. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him. And even though we may disagree on important religious questions, he is a firmly committed Christian and I am not. We are in complete agreement on a number of very important historical and textual questions. If he and I were put into a room, I'm losing the quote now here. If he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. Okay?
So this is not from a book.
So
is this a preface? What is that?
This is from Misquoting Jesus, page 252.
Okay.
Misquoting Jesus, page 252.
Read the last paragraph there.
So
the position I
argue for in Misquoting Jesus does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript edition of the New Testament.
So good. Now we are discussing the actual doctrines of Christianity. So the doctrines remain the same.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah. He would say there's
but
nothing
the point that we were discussing, was the actual text itself. Now let's see what Bruce Metzger says.
He says that the last paragraph before that. He says that there would only be 1 or 2 dozen places in the whole of the New Testament. Where he and Bruce Metzger would disagree upon what the text of the New Testament is.
No, he says about the teachings. Read that again, the last paragraph.
That's the last paragraph. The paragraph I read before that says, if he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there will be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands.
Okay.
So he's saying although there are many thousands of places where you have variants in the manuscripts, he and Professor Metzger would have only maybe 1 or 2,000 places where they would be in disagreement about what the original text is.
The important point there is probably.
Of course.
So this is because he doesn't have the original.
Of course, he doesn't have the original manuscripts, and therefore he cannot say this is 100% certain.
So now we are going on probability.
Now, the word probably.
Let's see what Bruce Metzger, his teacher, actually says about this. So Bruce Metzger says. Sorry, where's it going? Here it is. So this is Bruce Metzger from the New Testament, a historical introduction to the early Christian writings.
Yeah.
Okay? Oh, sorry, that is Bart Ehrman actually. Let me bring up
yeah.
Bruce Metzger. Oh, here it is. So this is, from the same book, the text of the New Testament, its transmission, corruption, and restoration.
Yeah.
This is from Bruce Metzger.
Yeah.
Okay, it says, none of the original documents of the New Testament is extant, and existing copies differ from one another. The textual critic seeks to ascertain from the divergent copies which form of the text should be regarded as most confirming to the original. So you already agree that none of the originals exist.
That's
yes?
right, yeah.
And then there are.
would agree with him on that. We don't have the original manuscripts as they're written by the original authors.
And the existing copies differ from one another. Now, the important point is that Bart Ehrman, in Misquoting Jesus, this is what he says. It is one thing to say that the originals were inspired, but the reality is that we don't have the originals. So saying that they were inspired doesn't help me much unless I can reconstruct the originals. This is Bart Ehrman. And then he goes on to say, moreover, the vast majority of Christians of the entire history of the church have not had access to the originals, making their inspiration something of a moot point. Okay, so you can say I'm inspired regardless of that. They don't have the original. So your inspiration is just your claim. No. And then he goes on to say, wait, I haven't finished it. He goes on to say, not only do we not have the originals, we don't have the first copies of the originals. We don't even have the copies of the originals.
I think that's a bit of a claim myself.
All copies of the copies of the copies of the originals. Let me finish and then you can say.
Yeah.
Okay? What we have, I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish. You let me finish the quote and then we can talk about, because it's important you listen to what Bart Ehrman is actually saying.
carry on.
Okay, so what he's saying is that not only do we not have the originals, we don't have the first copies of the originals, we don't even have the copies of the copies of the originals, or the copies of the copies of the copies of the originals. Yes? What we have are copies made later, much later. In most instances, they are copies made many centuries later. And these copies all differ from one another in many thousands of places,
Yeah,
centuries later.
Of variations,
Okay,
minor variations.
the important point there is centuries later. You know, in one video, I actually
So
heard
there are
Bart Ehrman say,
manuscripts which are used, which are centuries after. Yes, true.
you know how many centuries after?
There are some which are centuries after.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hijab's about to go into a conversation, so we'll be back live, hopefully with that in a moment. Keep tuned, inshallah.